Hello everyone, it's Nita and welcome back to my channel. So I have read about 50 audiobooks since I first started getting into them in the fall of 2021. And I wanted to talk about some of my favorites today, since I think audiobooks can really enhance the reading experience. I also think if you're a person who says you want to read more, but you don't have a lot of time, they're a really great alternative to reading physical books. This is basically a list of books where I think the narrator just did a really good job in bringing the stories to life. And I think because I read these as audiobooks first, I was just able to connect to the stories in a really special way that I don't know I would have had the same reaction to if I had just read them physically. Audiobook narration is a lot like being a voice actor, so you have to be a really good actor for it to work well. So these are all books where I feel like the narrator is really just doing above and beyond in setting the tone and affect for all of the characters they voice in the book. So without further ado, let's get into the video. The first book on this list is one that should be no surprise. It's one of the books I say is like my favorite books ever, and it's also the very first audiobook I ever read, so I was lucky to start out with a good one. And that is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee, which is narrated by Christian Coulson. This is a YA historical romance about Monty, who is an English lord who is traveling across Europe. It's this very light and fun adventure novel with a lot of hijinks. Like I said, this book is one of my favorites, and I do think a huge part of that is because of the narrator, Christian Coulson. He's traditionally a TV and movie actor who famously played Tom Riddle in the Harry Potter movies. He's also the only audiobook narrator that I feel like I've seen a lot of interviews for, just because I've looked at other content related to this book series. And he just seems like he really likes Monty so much as a character and cares about his story, which just makes it all the more special to me. Next book I'm going to talk about is probably from my favorite audiobook narrator of all time, and that is Belladonna by Adeline Grace, narrated by Kristen Atherton. This book is a YA fantasy historical romance about Cigna, who has to team up with the personification of death to solve her aunt's untimely murder. Kristen Atherton really is just like a goddess among men. She is hands down my favorite audiobook narrator. Obviously, when you're an audiobook narrator, you're playing all of the roles in the book, and I really love it when narrators are able to create different tones of voice for all of the characters to the point where I can even forget that they're being played by the same person, because they all seem so distinct and believable, and no one is cartoonish in their vocal performance. And Kristen Atherton is literally so good at her job. Her boy voice is so good. The first time I heard it, I literally did not believe it was her narrating it. I just assumed, oh, is this book dual narrated? No, it was just her, absolutely flexing and being a badass. Another book that is narrated by her that I definitely recommend as an audiobook is The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. I like this for the same reason as above, but definitely extra points because there is a song at one point in the book that she goes ahead and sings. She absolutely kills it, but this one is also co-narrated by a guy. But he just absolutely whiffs it and just reads it as a poem in his sections, which I feel highlights just how much above and beyond she's willing to go to perform. Switching gears now to talk about a different book series that I think is really great as audio, and that is the Aporson trilogy by Garth Nix, which is narrated by Tim Curry. This is a YA fantasy series that focuses on necromancy and this familial line of necromancers called the Aporson, whose job is to stop things from coming out of death and wreaking havoc in the living world. With Tim Curry as the narrator, obviously such an iconic actor known for really dramatic character work, I think what I love about his narration is the first two books in the series I just read physically, so then when I finally read the last in the trilogy as an audiobook, so I had my own ideas for how I thought different characters would sound, and his interpretation is so different, but also so correct in the choices he made. One character I'm thinking specifically is with Mogget, who is the talking cat. Not what I thought going into it, but at the same time, I absolutely love his performance of him. It's just really refreshing to hear, and I definitely want to go back and read the first two as audiobooks now. The next set of audiobooks I definitely would check out are the Caraval series and the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, which are written by Stephanie Garber, and all of them are narrated by Rebecca Soler. These are two separate YA fantasy series that are set in the same universe. They're very much relationship and vibes first, and a plot that will bend to whatever the vibes need to have happen second. I think Rebecca Soler is great. I think she's really good at portraying emotions and the intensity of scenes. I think she's a little bit better in Caraval. I just think she's able to flex her talent a little bit more there because of the structure of the story and the characters that she's playing. But I can see her being good in pretty much any story she's narrating. Very excited to continue on with the Caraval series so I can see her performances in that, as well as the last book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series that's coming out later this year. The next book we are going to be talking about is The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which is narrated by Donna Tartt. This is the dark academia staple that is about a group of ancient Greek students at a private college whom one of their cohort ends up dying, and it's basically a big whodunit of what went down before and after his murder. There's just something to be said about that special feeling of when an author narrates their own book. because you get to look into how the author thinks of the characters in a very deep way. I think it also definitely helps with The Secret History, where a lot of the humor that's in it is done through a very dry line delivery. Donna Tartt also has this very goofy, quirky voice that she uses for the character Bunny, which is both obviously very telling in how she sees him as a character, but Bunny is also a very divisive character, and I think it helps take the edge off of some of his very obvious character flaws because you can't take him that seriously. Really, really love this book. Definitely one of my favorites that I read last year, and also a really great audiobook. And the last books we are going to be talking about is the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black, narrated by Caitlin Kelly. This is a YA Fae fantasy series about a human girl named Jude who is living in the Fae world and her very tumultuous relationship with one of the Fae princes, Cardin. And there's also a lot of larger political intrigue involving the royal family. I think Caitlin Kelly is so good at portraying emotion and the intensity of the scenes that is really needed for a book like The Cruel Prince. She also has a really good boy voice, and also her boy voices are just so different because the voice she does for Jude's dad, Maddox, is very different from the one she does for Cardin. I haven't finished this series yet, but so far I've really enjoyed what I've heard of her, and I'm definitely excited to see her narration for the rest of the series. So that's just a quick look at some of the books that I think are really well performed as audiobooks. As I said in the intro, I have read 50 audiobooks, and it's not going to be stopping anytime soon. So I'll probably do another one of these videos in the future as I gain more audiobook favorites. That is going to be it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please consider liking this video or subscribing if you aren't already. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!